What's up guys, my name's Stu, and today we're going to be doing some theory crafting on a hypothetical ship that I've talked about a lot over the past couple of years. That's right folks, I am talking about the Legendary Akira command warship again, and oh boy, the strain on my sanity that this video has been. So the idea here was to create my own ship, stats and all, using the methods that Borticus showed us on a live stream a few weeks ago. I was originally going to come up with the whole process of me coming up with the stats, as they came to my head, and making that into a video turned out to be a gigantic ADHD mess. So instead, I'm going to be showing you the completed ideas and walk you through them step by step. However, I didn't want to throw away all the footage from before because there was a lot of it and that's just kind of a huge waste, so I will be uploading that content as it is as a members only video. So if you'd like to see me spiral into an ADHD-induced madness, feel free to hit that join button down below. Anyway, let's move on to why we're really here, the Legendary Akira, and what I really want its stats to be. But before I get started, I do just want to say that I'm going into this with no expectations whatsoever in terms of Cryptic, and frankly, the rest of you should be too, because Cryptic is going to build a ship however they want. Whether they want to listen to the rest of us, that's up to them. They are under no obligation to do so. Okay, that little disclaimer out of the way, let's head to it. Now, before I get into the exact stats of this thing, I want to kind of justify some of my thinking for this ship based off of lore from the shows and movies. I've said many times that I want the Akira to be a viable torpedo build, and that is largely because it is canonically a torpedo boat in universe, in Star Trek, because it's the only Federation ship that has like 16 torpedo tubes. I mean, not only that, it's also the only ship that has torpedo tubes on the port and starboard side of the ship. Now, to be a proper torpedo build, it's got to have command seating because you need concentrate firepower 3, but you also need to have room for torpedo high yield 3 at the same time. Now, as for my justification for it being a warship, again, one, the thing has 16 torpedo tubes, that's a lot of weapons points. But additionally, this ship was designed during a period of conflict within the Federation, though there are a couple different ways you could look at that. I know a lot of people view the Defiant as one of the anti-Borg ships that Starfleet developed, much like the Defiant, but that line of thinking is really only backed up by the fact that the ship's first appearance was in Star Trek First Contact. But it's basically the same story with the Norway, the Saber, and the Steamrunner. So it really doesn't make sense to me that all of these different ships would also be anti-Borg ships. Especially when it was stated earlier in Deep Space Nine that it was really only the Defiant that was being designed as part of this anti-Borg fleet that Starfleet had been envisioning that never really came to fruition. Why would all these other anti-Borg ships make it into production, but not the Defiant? But the answer to that is because those ships are actually older than the Defiant. At least that's what Thomas Moroni thinks. And I only know this because he stated this on Twitter, that he thinks that the Akira wasn't designed to fight the Borg, but was actually designed to fight the Cardassians. Basically, his headcanon for the Akira is that it was a ship that was designed to have weapon superiority over multiple inferior enemies. During the Cardassian border war, Starfleet had the edge in technology, but in that area, Cardassians had the edge in numbers, so the Akira was kind of the answer to be able to overwhelm multiple enemies at once, by being able to fire multiple torpedoes in every freaking direction. So with this headcanon in mind, the Akira being a warship still makes a lot of sense because it was literally designed during a major conflict in Federation history, that being the Cardassian border wars. Now, as for why I personally want it to be a warship, it's because that way it can still be an escort and still have 8 weapon slots. That's 8 normal weapon slots, not just 7 and an experimental weapon. Though now I'm just getting ahead of myself even more than I already was, so let's take a look at the process of what I went through to make these stats. During a 10 Forward Weekly livestream, Borticus came on and kind of showed the process of what he goes through when he starts initially coming up with the stats for a new ship. One of the first things he does is takes several other ships that already exist in the game and use them as sort of a jumping off point for the sake of comparison to create the stats for this new ship. This basically gives you a good line of comparison for what other past ships have had for their stats. So that's the first thing I did here. I got originally 10, I ended up with 11 ships that I want to compare and use those to kind of develop the stats of what I want this Legendary Akira to be. Since this is a Legendary Akira, it seemed like a good idea to bring in the original Tier 6 Akira, so that we got its stats over here. Then I brought in the other First Contact ships because may as well, so we've got the Fleet Saber, the Fleet Norway, and the Appalachia because the Steamrunner does not have a fleet version. And because this is going to be a warship, I figured it would be a good idea to compare it to other warships. So we've got the Fleet Hoover Temporal Warship, the Mirror Gagarin Warship, the Mirror Constitution Warship from the lockboxes, the Husnak Warship, and the United Earth Defense vessel. I was going to wrap it up with the Legendary Defiant Pilot Warship because that is both a legendary ship and a warship, so this would be a good source of comparison for what I want this to be. But I also figured it would be a good idea to kind of see the transition of that ship from its original Tier 6 version to the legendary version, because that is an excellent example of a normal escort being turned into a warship. So I also brought in the Fleet Defiant Tactical Escort. Now, I went a little high with the hull modifier on this thing because, one, it's a warship. Warships, I mean, past warships have had pretty high hull modifiers if you look at all these, the only exception being the Temporal Warship, which actually had a fairly low hull modifier, but I felt like the Akira, it worked for the Legendary Akira because, I mean, the Akira, it's not a small ship, at least if you go by the dimensions made by the original creator. But yeah, I felt like this worked. I mean, I could probably back it down a little bit, but I felt like 1.3 worked reasonably well for it. And I kind of like the idea of a high hull modifier because that's going to feed into Tyler's duality. So that's going to be a little bit more crit chance. I went a bit lower on the shield modifier with only 0.95, kind of like on the Legendary Defiant, which is rather low in comparison to some of the others on here, though I feel like maybe I could have gone a little bit lower, maybe because I do have the hull modifier a bit higher than most of these, so I probably could have gone a bit lower with the shields, kind of like here on the Mirror Gagarin. But that said, I mean, this still isn't even the highest one on the list. I mean, the Norway has a very high hull modifier for an escort, so I figured this could kind of work for here too. Now, for the turn rate, I went a bit lower than the original, but that's because, while it is lower than the other normal escorts, it is pretty much in line with some of the other warships. Because I got this set to 13.5. You can see the Fleet Hoover is at 14, Mirror Gagarin, 12, Mirror Constitution, 13.5. You know, it's very much in that ballpark, and I felt like this was an appropriate number for this ship as well. It's the same story with the impulse modifier. I've got that set to 0.19. So I tried to keep that in line with the other warships, though. Honestly, I probably could have brought it down to 0.18. Yeah, honestly, that probably would have been a good idea. But I figured because it is a legendary ship, maybe it should have a little bit extra in the stats, because again, these ships do have to befit the name legendary. So I figured I'd go a little bit extra there, but we could knock that down a little bit. And again, same story with the inertia rating. I probably could have gone a little bit lower than that. I mean, it's already kinda low-ish in terms of, like, if you look at the pilot warship. Of course, that is a pilot ship, but I mean, I didn't want to go as low as like 45 because, I mean, while this is a warship, the Mirror Gagarin is an event ship, and their stats are always a bit noticeably lower than certain other ships. So I wanted this to be a legendary ship. So I did keep that a little high, but again, that could probably take another small hit if need be. For the power bonuses, I mean, part of this is just straightforward because these are all escorts. Of course, they all have buffs to weapons, so I kept that. But I didn't want to just replicate the power bonuses from the original ship. Largely because I want this to be a torpedo build, and weapons power really doesn't do anything for a torpedo build because the extra weapons power, it's not like the extra weapons power makes the torpedoes that much more powerful like they do with energy weapons. So I decided to take 5 out of that and put that into shields. I know, astonishing, but that extra little bit of shield power is going to feed into the Discovery Shield, so it kind of thematically works, I guess. Now, the weapons layout. This is always the thing I get the most pushback on because I want this to be a 4-4 layout. Gasp, I know, but that is actually better for torpedo builds because that way you can get 4 torpedoes in the front and 4 mine launchers in the back. Mines are very powerful these days in Star Trek Online, especially when mixed with a proper torpedo build, and having a 4th one in the back is going to do much better damage than having a 5th torpedo in the front, because the way torpedoes work is that they fire sequentially. It's not like with energy weapons where they just fire all at once. With the torpedoes, they've all got to fire one after another, after another, after another. And by the time you get to that 5th weapon slot, that first one's going to be off cooldown. So that 5th torpedo probably never going to fire, which is why in that case we usually just put an energy weapon there for the sake of a set bonus. But that, you know, that doesn't matter how good that set bonus is, it's not going to be as good as another mine in the back. And again, thematically, that does make the most sense for the ship, because it has torpedoes all over the ship, so it can get as even a distribution of torpedoes as it possibly can. So a 4-4 layout is as even as it gets. We got 3 device slots. I mean, there's really not much to say there. All warships have 3 device slots, so of course this one too. Now the bridge officer layout, that is where I began to lose my mind in the previous recording. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail going into explaining on how I came up with this layout, mostly because that's just an inevitable spiral down into ADHD madness. But the one thing I do want to really explain is the secondary temporal seat. And I want it to be a secondary temporal seat mainly because of, I mean, the Akira has been involved in some time travel shenanigans, because I mean, think about when we first see this ship. It's in First Contact, you know, with the battle with the Borg cube, you know, it blows up, you know, the ships scatter all over the place. But, you know, immediately after that, the Borg sphere travels back in time. So that's, you know, that's one major temporal incursion that multiple Akiras are present at. But then, fast forward, think about the Akira's latest appearance in Star Trek Picard. In the first episode of Season 2, the first thing we see is that weird anomaly opening up, and it opens up right under an Akira class. And, you know, then that whole season progresses, and again, that's more time travel shenanigans. So that's 2 major temporal events where multiple Akira class ships were present. So, I mean, by that nature alone, a temporal seat just makes sense to me. Now, in case you need more justification for a secondary temporal seat, don't worry, I have some, because, I mean, think about the Akira and the NX. We know that the NX class was designed as kind of an homage to the Akira class, but, I mean, from an inter-universe perspective, you could kind of flip the script on that and say that the Akira was designed with influence from the original NX's design. So again, that would imply a temporal seat, because I mean, the Legendary NX does, I mean, it's a full temporal ship, but again, you can also justify that because, I mean, the NX had several of its own time travel shenanigans going on. I mean, the temporal Cold War alone, again, temporal, it just makes sense here. But yeah, getting into the actual seating itself, mainly the goal here was to accommodate a setup similar to this. Basically, these are the abilities I would want to use on this setup. So we've got Fire at Will and Scatter Volley in the tactical seating, mostly because you need that for entwined tactical matrices. That's going to be where you're getting your extra torpedo spreads for a torpedo build. Then we got Concentrate Firepower. That's where you're getting your extra high yields from. This is why Concentrate Firepower 3 is essential for a torpedo build, because those extra high yields that it gives. We've also got Call Emergency Artillery 3. This, not only did I want this here because it's a really good ability ever since Command got buffed, but also I love the idea of being able to recreate that scene from Message in a Bottle just by clicking a button, because remember, the fleet of ships that comes to rescue the Prometheus from the Romulans consists of an Akira class and 2 Defiants. So if in Star Trek Online, if you're flying on a Federation character, if you use Call Emergency Artillery, it will call in 3 Defiant class ships. So with this setup, you could be in a Defiant and then press a button, and then 3 Defiant class ships will swoop in. So you're basically recreating that shot from Message in a Bottle, and that just makes me smile, and I want that to be a thing. Okay, more into the seating. Yeah, Chemosite Laser Weaponry 1, Mine Dispersal Pattern Beta 1, and then High Yield 3. That's why I have both a Commander and a Lieutenant Commander tactical seat, because, I mean, it needs to be kind of tactical heavy, because one of those tactical seats is also being taken up by the Command seat, so we're already losing 2 high-level abilities to Concentrate Firepower and Call Emergency Artillery. We need to have room for both Concentrate Firepower 3 and High Yield 3. The engineering scene, we got Emergency Power to Weapons 1 and Emit Unstable Warp Bubble 1. The first one's just for a speed buff. The second is just for an unconventional systems trigger. Again, a lot of abilities in engineering seating just aren't very useful, and God, that whole tree just needs a revamp, honestly, because there are not a lot of good abilities in there. But that's not what this video is about. Moving on to the science seat, I went pretty low with the science seating because the Akira's never really given me the impression that it's never been used as a science ship. It's always been every time we see it, it's always fighting something. But, you know, so I I just gave it the ensign level seat, and for there I would use tractor beam, but I also wanted to give it a level of versatility, which is why I gave it a lieutenant commander universal seat. But to kind of mitigate it being too well-rounded, that's where I also put the temporal seat. Now, I am a little worried that putting the temporal seat on the universal seat could be considered a little overpowered, because I am giving this thing the ability to use recursive shearing 1. Of course, for that you will have to sacrifice gravity well, and I mean, do you really want to sacrifice gravity well? And honestly, I think a number of people would, for the sake of recursive sharing, but again, that kind of gives you a give and take on what you might want to do with this ship. You can either get a little bit more control, or you can get more punchy with the DPS. That said, I would not be surprised if Cryptic would want to move the temporal seat to something else, and if that is the case, for the love of God, put it on the engineering seat. The consoles are pretty straightforward, just 533. You could probably back off on the science consoles a bit and put one more into engineering, so it's 542. Honestly, the only one that really matters is the tactical consoles anyway, because that's where your vulnerability locators are going to go, or vulnerability exploiters, depending on how high you want your crit chance and or severity. Everything else is just going to be universal consoles. Now, this being a warship, it's going to have 0 hangar bays, and again, I know that is one of the things that I get a lot of pushback on, because y'all really want that hangar bay, because the original Akira was a strike wing escort. Guys, trust me, this setup is better. And I mean, I guess this is just me, but I never really bought into the idea of the Akira being a pseudo carrier in Star Trek, because I mean, for one, we never see that happen in the Dominion War. Sure, we see a number of fighters in the Dominion War, but we never see them actually get deployed from an Akira class, or really from anywhere. They're just kind of flying with the rest of the fleet. If Starfleet was going to make an actual carrier, you would think they would make an actual proper carrier, not this, you know, relatively average-sized ship that already has its own torpedo specialty, because again, the Akira has 16 torpedo bays. Why add hangar bays into that in addition? Because it just, I don't know, it just seemed like a weird mishmash of ideas, and I never really liked it. And again, the main reason I want this to be a warship is so it can have that 4-4 weapons layout for, you know, it being a torpedo mine layer. And yeah, making it a strike wing escort, I'm going to lose one of those weapon slots, because then that's going to turn into an experimental weapon. And I mean, Soliton Wave Impeller is good, but it's still not quite as good as more mines. Another reason I want this to be a warship is because they get the best mastery package, that being the Destroyer mastery package, because that one has traits that are all offensive based. It gets buffs to accuracy, crit chance, crit severity, and energy and kinetic damage. Strike-wing escorts just get the standard escort package, so they sacrifice that crit severity buff for a boost to, I think it's defense rating, which defense rating, that has no business being on an escort. God, some of these mastery packages make no sense whatsoever, and it bugs the crap out of me. Anyway, that pretty much covers what I want to see for a Legendary Akira Command warship. Now, the most painful thing about this video is that, well, nothing is going to come of it, honestly. Cryptic's going to make the ship they want. And honestly, when it comes to a Legendary Akira, I think they would go with the Strike Wing Escort more than a warship. Now, if Cryptic wants to make its first Strike Wing warship, I certainly wouldn't complain, but I don't see that happening. I would be astonished if that ever happened. So, in the interest of compromise, as much as it pained me to do so, there, are you happy? Okay, so I did make a setup for what I would like to see if the Legendary Akira was a Strike Wing Escort, because if it's going to happen, it may as well be as close to what I want as it can be. So, modified all the modifiers to be more in line with a standard escort, because this is a Strike Wing Escort. May have gone a little high with the impulse modifier, but that's fine. I also tweaked the power bonuses a little bit, because if we are going to have an experimental weapon, I want this to feed a little bit more into Soliton Wave Impeller, so I bumped the engines up to +10 and got rid of the shield buff. We lose a device slot because this isn't standard escort. And the thing that bugs me the most is that we lose out on one of those weapon slots. So now it is a 4-3-1, the one being the experimental weapon. Yep, there you go. Oh, that's incorrect. This would have 1 there. Yeah, we get 1 hangar bay, and then we get the escort mastery package. Again, another annoyance, because the warship mastery package is better because it gets the destroyer package. So yeah, there you go. For the sake of compromise, there's that. But honestly, guys, this This is better. This is better. Trust me. I know y'all don't, but trust me, this is better. I don't know why I keep trying to insist on that. It's not like I'm going to change anyone's mind. Honestly, that is probably the most depressing thing about this video, is because it's not going to serve anything. Because, I mean, Cryptic's going to do whatever Cryptic wants to do. I don't begrudge them for that. They have the right to do so, obviously. But, I mean, the other thing is that I know once this goes up, I'm going to get a bunch of comments saying, no, it should be like this. Because, I mean, I'm not going to change any of your minds. Y'all know what you want. I know what I want. The only difference is I'm going the extra mile to actually make stats that, again, will accomplish nothing. Because, guys, this took so much work. I honestly, I have a newfound respect for the ship designers, because this drove me up the freaking wall trying to make. Yeah. And this is just ship stats. I didn't even make a trait for the thing. But yeah, in the end, all this really is just an interesting thought exercise for myself. I hope you guys get something out of it too. I don't know. I will probably never do this again, because holy crap, was this hard. Honestly, it wasn't so much the making the ship stats that was hard. It was editing the first recording. That's what broke me. That is the thing that broke me. And again, if you want to see that, hit that join button. All right, let's wrap this up. So yeah, that is my theory craft of the Legendary Akira command warship. It would be amazing, but I don't think it will ever happen, but I can dream. Anyway, if you thought this setup was interesting, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe as well. If you think the Legendary Akira should be something completely different, I don't want to hear it. This video has already left me mentally fragile enough as it is. Seriously, I can't take anymore. Seriously, someone told me that it should be a flight deck carrier on Twitter. Can you... I don't understand some of you, honestly. Alright, seriously, let's wrap this up before I really do lose my mind. Okay, like, comment, subscribe, hit all the things down below. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu. I will see you guys next time.